Spin that wheel around and round. Which excuse is George throwing down? Seems to be with somewhat consistency. We can't go but a couple of days without George R.R. Martin coming back and making headlines in regards to, complaining about his laziness and how everybody else is ruining his masterpiece. Well, you're not finishing your masterpiece and somebody else is trying to create something out of it. So instead of being grateful, he's just being spiteful like every other old commie boomer. But I digress, because here we have the Hollywood Reporter with an expose on two of the most, I was going to say popular, but in the case of House of the Dragon, that's very much the case, and in, the latter with Rings of Power, not really prominent. I think prominent is maybe a little bit more applicable in this certain scenario, especially because, well, yeah, House of the Dragon has the viewership, over 8 million people for just about every episode, and I think it's been on an upward trajectory, and Rings of Power, well, shit cost $1 billion, okay? How could you not say that that's prominent? But instead of focusing on the Rings of Power stuff, which we touched on that a few days ago with the ratings video, I want to focus on House of the Dragon, the George R.R. Martin side of stuff, because he's just been a fat old nihilistic boomer in the past few weeks, and it has been increasingly more and more insufferable to listen to this fathead bitch and whine. So I'll pick up this article right here. The second season incensed some fans after spending 8 episodes, leading to a massive cliffhanger climactic battle sequence that is pushed from a shortened season 2 to season 3, apparently for budgetary reasons. Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Because House of the Dragon season 2 was being scripted and written during a writer's strike, so nobody was allowed to go back and rewrite it. HBO said, yeah, we ain't got the bucks for, the big battle that we want to have at the end of the season, so we'll just push it off to season 3, which is kind of interesting because the progression of events is also going to call for several big budget battles in seasons 3 and 4. So if you're pushing off one of the bigger battles to the second battle, to the third season, I don't know, man. It's interesting. I love the show, okay? There's several aspects of this, including some of the changes that George is going to deride, that makes the show the high quality that it is. Flushing out Daemon Targaryen at Harrenhal, that has been fantastic. That is some of the best stuff that they've done in the entire series, not just the season. Hell, even if you want to focus specifically on George, punching the air about the changes that were made. Oh, they got rid of the baby. Bro, Ryan Condal made a better Viserys Targaryen than you ever could in your book. And you admitted it. So 2 weeks ago, Saga author and Dragon co-creator and executive producer, keep that in mind, George R.R. Martin, who has been complimentary about Dragon in the past, posted that on his blog, and then he deleted it, that he's going to reveal everything that's gone wrong with the show. And yeah, it was just him bitching and complaining and my butterfly wings and how that could have a knock-on effect. And yeah, I do understand lesser minds would go ahead and, make these changes to my secret source material. It's like those insufferable cretins that look at a great superhero movie, who bitch and moan about the first Joker film and go, oh, that's never going to be the Joker that's going to square off against Batman. Oh, he's too old. Why'd you call it the Joker? Arthur Fleck's not the Joker. That's Jack Napier. What are you doing? You're desecrating the source material. Instead of just looking at the product for what it is and assessing it on its qualities, on its merits, its standalone authenticity, and coming to the conclusion that, yeah, House of the Dragon is actually better than the source material from Fire and Blood. Yeah, Joker is probably the best superhero film to come out in the better part of a decade. Now, Joker 2, don't quite know about that, but the standalone Joker film, I think it's analogous to, well, George's complaints, because he wants to be a, text purist. Oh, if you're going to make an adaptation, you need to use all of the source material. Not necessarily true. Some of it, hey, guess what? Some of the source material could actually suck. I know, right? And the story that could be made based on the ideas that are laid down in text could actually be better. I know, right? Shocking. Redrafting, reworking certain concepts could be better than the original. Oh my, all of these minds that are being blown right now. Last week, Martin did, and the result was fascinating. Candid rundown of his concerns about the removal of a young character in the show. Yes, because Aegon and Helena were supposed to have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and a little baby Maegor. Jaehaerys was still supposed to have his head flopped off, which it did in the first episode. And Maelor was supposed to be the heir apparent. But guess what? He still dies. Spoilers, right? Like, no King Maelor. You just take a look at the Targaryen line of kings, and you notice a specific lack of King Maelor in there. So it's not that consequential. And the way that the way that season 2 plays out, and I'm not going to spoil anything else, plays out the way that it does in the books, because it's really not that consequential. But arguing that, yeah, one change could, be indicative of other changes, and if you're not thoughtful about this and how it could have knock-on effects over there, things could fall apart like tissue paper. But George, bro, you're having a problem with your own books. Something we're going to talk about in very short order. That, yeah, you get too expansive with your ideas, and then you bitch yourself out of finishing any ideas. But anyways, but last week, yeah, Martin did, and the result was fascinating. Candid rundown of his concerns and removal of the young character in the show that, in his view, has already led to a key sequence being weakened in the second season and will cause greater creative issues in seasons 3 and 4. Which, yeah, they really could have, even with everything that was there, they could have made some changes to the blood and cheese sequence, and it could have been just as horrific. Like, okay, if you don't want the blood and cheese sequence spoiled for you, just go ahead and skip ahead 10 to 20 seconds, because there were still twins that were in the room, right? You still could have posited the same conundrum that was in the books, where, okay, yeah, Helena, and it's like, well, okay, which one's the boy, which one's the girl? They're young kids, they're not going to have any, secondary sexual characteristics manifest at such a young age. You still could have put the Sophie's Choice decision of, okay, which one's the oldest one, which one do you want to die? She picks the daughter, saw the head off the son, and then they still go with the idea of, hey, did you hear that? You want your mom to die? You still could have done that. You still could have had Helena offer her life as payment, but they've also made some changes to Helena's character that are going to be consequential going forward, because after the blood and cheese sequence, she loses her mind and goes and lives in the tower in the books. Like, she's donezo, but she also wasn't set up as a dreamer going forward. So yeah, the spoilers over at this point. The post included some of his discussions with Ryan Condal, who became sole showrunner after, yeah, thank God, Miguel Sapochnik, which I worked really hard on The Long Night, bro. You shouldn't be so mad that it was, shot in a closet, idiot, and tipped to what the showrunner had planned next season. Yes, reached for comment about the dragon situation. Martin instead offered some high praise for his next HBO series. Yeah, another unfinished book series, George, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Yeah, coming to the platform last year. I visited the set in Northern Ireland in July, and I loved what I saw. Great cast, Duncan. Oh, look as if they walked out of the pages of my book. The readers are going to love them. I certainly do. Until a point in time where things end up ultimately getting changed because they run out of source material, and then you just bitch and whine about that while your fat ass sits at home and does absolutely nothing. Because here's the thing, okay, because I've talked about it and so many other people will. It's like, hey, George, shut up and finish the book. Well, Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin says that he has not made much Winds of Winter progress lately, as TV shows ate up time. Yeah, exactly, ate up a lot of his time, huh? But that's interesting, right? The TV shows that he is, let's just go ahead and check that one more time. All right, co-creator, what the hell is going on here? I guess you can't, highlight anything on the Hollywood Reporter. Co-creator and executive producer. You aren't doing anything. Executive producers just sit back and take a percentage. Co-creator, yeah, it's based on your books. There you go. You get a credit. You don't do anything except for bitch and complain at home. You go and visit the set 6 months ago. What the fuck else are you doing, you fat bastard? Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin says that he has made a little progress lately with the latest The Song of Ice and Fire book. The infamously delayed The Winds of Winter. Yeah, exactly. It's never coming out. It is just not coming out. First half of the year was pretty miserable, right? Close friend died suddenly in January. Wouldn't you think, right? Like, brushes with mortality like that would make you realize that, oh God, I'm also not in great condition. I'm going to have a legacy when it's all said and done. Wouldn't you want to try to start to sew up loose ends? Unless, of course, he's already made up his mind that, maybe the legacy of the guy who didn't finish the books is better than the guy who couldn't finish the books. The guy who finished the books, but it was a bad finish to the books. Maybe he would rather be remembered as being lazy instead of being incompetent. Maybe he doesn't want the world to actually realize that he's just a scared fat old man. Writing came hard, and then I did produce some new pages for both Winds and Blood and Fire, sequel to Fire and Blood, the second book in my Targaryen Targaryen history. Well, what the hell are you going to tell? What's a part of that book? Something else that we're never really going to know. I would have liked to turn out a lot more. Well, yeah, you weren't working on anything. No, when will Winds of Winter come? We'll read through the rest of this, and we'll take this poll in real time. My various television products ate up most of those months. Some of that was pleasant. Dark Winds, which one's that? And The Hedge Knight, most of it was not. Stress kept mounting. The news went from bad to worse. My mood seemed to swing between fury and despair. Unbelievable. You made one visit in July, and that ate up the early part of your year. Make that one make sense. And again, you're co-creator and executive producer. You don't do fuck all. I did sleep well. My dreams were none too pleasant either. I don't care, bro. It's been 13 years since a mainline entry. Over 4,800 days at this point in time. Nobody's crying for the whining, complaining procrastinator. But A Song in Ice and Fire fans will be disappointed to hear of a lack of Winds of Winter progress. However, especially after hearing practically the same thing in 2023, when Martin said that he'd written around 1,100 pages of the book in totality, not just in 2023, which was the same number he'd had a year earlier. There was plenty of work to be done without actually increasing the page total, of course. And that's interesting, right? Because, like we said earlier, he's kind of created so many problems for himself that he probably doesn't know how to finish, right? Like, he's got the mirror and he's not. He has no idea how to conclude that storyline, which they butchered in season 6. You know, Speds, for whatever reason, really liked that season because Battle of the Bastards. It was so stupid. Why did Ramsay meet him out in the field? I digress. But, poor John's been bleeding out at Castle Black since 2011. Daenerys has been in Marine. One of my favorite statistics. She's been in Marine since the Clinton administration. That's wild. What's going to happen with young Griff? Is he going to sit the throne and be the inspiration behind the Mad Queen eventually on-mowering, King's Landing, taking the Israel Dragon of Peace and going over Gaza, that is, Flea Bottom, figuring out how to appropriately get Bran out of the north, back to King's Landing, what else is there? Okay, deal with Lady Stoneheart. Most of the stuff, right? Like, there was a guideline. There was a loose framework for Dumb and Dumber to adapt for Game of Thrones. Those are most of the story beats that are going to be in the books, outside of, yes, young Griff, Lady Stoneheart, that conclusion over there. And then, of course, you got Euron Greyjoy descending upon the High Tower right now in Old Town. All right, the resolution with Winterfell as well, coupled with all of the other story points that were brought up in seasons 5 and 6. Like, he's got a lot of stuff to do. Hence why the book would theoretically be, as big as it is, 1,100 pages. But he doesn't know how to finish any of that stuff. And the way that he writes, I don't think he can, because eventually people are going to have these hero turns. There's going to have to be not morally gray characters. There's going to have to be good characters. There's going to have to be bad characters. There's going to have to be some stereotypical, archetypal characters to come out. And George doesn't want to write that. He wants to subvert somebody. He wants Arya to stab the Night King. But there's also no Night King in the book, so how is he going to have Arya get out of Braavos and then eventually, get back to Winterfell? Doesn't know what he's doing, and that's a reason why the Winds of Winter will come out not this year, not next year, 2028 or later. Why isn't there a it's never coming out option? Because everybody's basically on that same shit where it's like, it's never coming out, bro. Never coming out. He would rather be known as the guy who couldn't finish instead of the guy who finished poorly, and that's going to be his legacy. That's why he continues to poison the well on all of his projects, because nobody can do George R.R. Martin's work better than George R.R. Martin, but also anybody who finishes George R.R. Martin's work will never be as good as George R.R. Martin. And while he can opine about how Tolkien didn't write about Aragorn's tax plan as King of Gondor, he finished the books and he's beloved the world over, 60, 70, 80, going on a century in circulation. You'll just be the fat old bitter man who has just shat on his legacy and whined about it the entire time. Sucks to suck, fat boy. Finish the book and then maybe I'll take your critiques a little bit more seriously. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.